In the last episode of this series, we began to look at the arms and the idea of rounded shoulders. Something didn't quite add up, though. With a little observation, it seemed clear that most people do not have their shoulders rounded forward. Instead, we found that people tend to have their arms pulled back in relation to their torso. Another way we can look at this question is to zoom in on the shoulder blades. If I ask you to squeeze your shoulder blades together, which is a cue that is sometimes given to deal with rounded shoulders, I want you to take note of what happens to your arms. What you will almost certainly find is that when you squeeze your shoulder blades together, your arms and your elbows will be pulled back. There is no magic to this. The shoulder blade is connected to the arm. When one goes back, the other typically goes back. But you'll recall the cue was to pull your shoulder blades together. So then the question becomes, why would you want your shoulder blades to be closer together? Let's say you wanted your back to be lengthened and widened. And let's say you wanted to have broad shoulders as opposed to narrowed shoulders. Wouldn't that mean you want your shoulder blades to be as far apart as they could be? Here we can see a very basic fact about the shoulders and the shoulder blades. When you pull the shoulder blades together, they will be pulled back, and the arm will be pulled back, which means your elbow will be pulled back. This also works the other way. If you pull your elbow back, or you pull your upper arm back, you will pull your shoulder blades back and in towards the spine. You will narrow your upper back. Of course, we know that in order to stretch the fascia of the body, we need to widen and lengthen the back and the torso generally. If we want to do that, it follows that we need our shoulder blades to be as far apart as possible. That means that the arms will also be widened and not narrowed. To be fair to the rounded shoulders crowd, we must acknowledge that they are right about one thing. They claim that people pull their arms forward and in towards the body. They are wrong in saying that people pull their arms forward, but they are correct that people pull their arms in towards their body. However, pulling your shoulders and arms back will bring your shoulders and arms in towards your body. So it's a bit confusing why they would recommend that. Remember, your shoulder blades sit on the side of your rib cage. The rib cage is more or less a cylinder. If you pull the shoulder blades back, they must move closer together. So you will never solve the problem of your arms being too close to the body by pulling back. We can also think back to what we know about the upper sternum. Most people pull their upper sternum back, which rotates the rib cage back and down. The arms connect to the upper sternum at the front. So it's no surprise that most people's arms are also pulled too far back. Having the arms and shoulders back then adds a weight that will keep the upper torso pulled back, and the lower ribs forward. If we want to straighten the rib cage and get the upper sternum forward, pulling the shoulders and arms forward will actually help us with that. I hope it's clear by now that the idea of rounded shoulders is wrong. It's a misconception of the postural problems that people do have in their arms. So if you've been pulling your arms back to help with your posture, stop. It's not helping. It's narrowing your back and your shoulders. But most people do feel that they have a downward pull on their body that pulls them into a slump and prevents them from being fully upright. Many think this is the result of rounded shoulders, but is there a better explanation? In my view, the mistake is that many people do not consider their torso. It's not that your arms are dragging your torso down, it's that your rib cage is drooping down towards your pelvis. But since people are so much more familiar with their arms than their torso, they try to fix the problem through what they're familiar with, their arms, and do not even consider their torso. If we look at images that claim to show rounded shoulders, you will often see that it's in fact the torso, particularly the lower end of the rib cage, that is forward and also down. There are also many fake pictures of bad posture out there, pictures where someone is imitating poor posture to show what they think the problem looks like. When they do this, they often exaggerate the drooping of the head and the forwardness of the arms to a point that is not realistic. And whether they did it intentionally or not, they will shove their lower ribs forward and down, moving the rib cage down towards the pelvis. A funny thing to note, however, is that even in these exaggerated fake poses, these people cannot get their arms or shoulders forward of their chest. This should put to rest any notion that people habitually move their arms and shoulders too far forward, or that they have a difficult time moving them back. The exact opposite is true. Even when someone is exaggerating, they are incapable of moving their arms and shoulders forward of the frontal plane. So here's a question for you. If we want to widen the upper back, spread the shoulder blades apart, and bring the arms into the appropriate position, should we move the shoulders, upper arms, and elbows up or down? There are a couple of ways that we can investigate this. First, we can look at the anatomy and think over what we've learned so far to determine what reasonably makes sense. If you move your shoulders up and down, when are your shoulder blades moving towards the spine, and when are they moving away from the spine? We can also try observing people. Do people habitually pull their shoulders, upper arms, and elbows up or down? A nice way you can observe yourself is to try stirring something, like whipping up some whipped cream. If you don't have anything to stir, just use a pen or ruler to imitate stirring. Do it for a full minute and see what happens. What do you habitually do with your elbow and shoulder? As you get tired, do you want to move your elbow up or down? Since we know most people have bad posture, we can be pretty sure whatever is common and habitual for most people will be the direction we do not want to move our shoulders, elbows, or arms. Give it some thought and then join me next episode, and we'll develop our conception of the proper use of the arms.